Hi there, welcome to Boat 54. I am Hawa and this is Ordinary People Africa. Ordinary People is a series containing interviews of ordinary men and women of Africa beating the odds in and out of Africa. In this series, I will be collaborating with Dayo Diaspora, hosted by Undu. Dayo Diaspora is a podcast celebrating African diaspora as change makers, innovators, and entrepreneurs working together to make the world the best place to live in. I would recommend checking out more of their content on your website at www.theirdiasporashow.com, and do check out the description box below for more information. Before we get started, if this is your first time, thank you for joining us. Our passion here at Boa 54 is to promote a positive Africa, one video at a time. If this sounds like anything you would love to be a part of, go ahead and join the family of Boa by hitting that subscribe button and notification bell next to it so you can keep learning about Africa and you don't miss anything. Also, most importantly, share this video and channel with your family and friends to help us promote a positive Africa. Be sure to check out Boa 54 merch. Every purchase that you make helps us produce this videos that you guys so much love. So let's get into the interview. A little disclaimer though, this is an audio interview, so take a listen.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Dayo Diaspora. I am so excited for y'all to listen to this conversation. I had such a great chat with the founder of Africlick. So Africlick is a new dating and networking app for ambitious professionals and creatives of African and Caribbean heritage. Whether you're based in London, Lagos, Harare, or Houston, their mission is to empower you to connect to your culture. So if you want to learn more about Africlick and pre-register for the app, you can go to africlick.com. Dayo Akinrinade is the founder of Africlick. She holds a bachelor's degree in computer science from the University of Manchester and a master's in technology entrepreneurship from University College London. She's spent over 10 years working in IT management consulting. And as you would imagine, her job required a lot of travel and sometimes had her, staying in hotels for up to 6 months at a time. And so as she navigated balancing work, travel, and trying to meet new people, something dawned on her. Dating and meeting new people was hard, especially when thinking about how you can connect with people from similar cultural backgrounds. So after using, your traditional dating apps like Tinder and things, she didn't have the best experience, and she thought to herself, there has to be a better way for Black people to meet, network, date, mingle, all the things. And Africlick was born. I personally can't wait for Africlick to be available like everywhere. I'm new to Kansas City, as most of you know, and I immediately thought to myself when I moved here, like, how do I easily just meet people with similar backgrounds, similar interests, just with similar values? Like, there's not a place you can really do that, outside of, meeting people and going to events and things like that. And so I would love an easy way to do that, just on my phone. And I can't wait for this to exist in Kansas City. And I can't wait for y'all to hear more about her and, Africlick and, where she hopes to see it in the next few years. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Dayo Akinrinade. Dayo, thank you so much for being a guest on Dear Diaspora. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm totally excited to be here too.
Yes. And so let's get started by just finding out a bit more about what you're building, Africlick. For those that are not familiar with it, how would you describe what it is and how it's going to work?
Okay, so Africlick in itself, the name is a play on words. It's where Africans click. We fuse the two words together. What we mean by click is, when sometimes two people meet and they just have a great connection and you kind of say, oh my gosh, we both clicked. It was great. We were talking all evening and we just had like the best time. So in terms of the product, Africlick, we're a new dating app and we are for ambitious professionals and creatives of African and Caribbean heritage. So, in essence, we're a dating app for people, and as long as you can trace your roots back to somewhere in Africa or somewhere in the Caribbean, we're here basically. And in essence, our mission is to empower us to connect through our culture, meaning that we're, understanding that there's definitely a need and a desire for a lot of us, maybe when we're choosing whether it's who we want to date or our life partner. A lot of the time, it's important to us to be with someone who appreciates our culture, understands our culture, and who is from the culture. And yeah, that's in essence what we're enabling to happen. And we're looking at this globally as well. So the way we see it from Africlick, whether you are in London, whether you are in Lagos or Houston or Zimbabwe, or maybe if you happen to be studying, and us Africans, we study everywhere, right? Like as far flung as Malaysia and China or whatnot. But if you're somewhere in a new city and you're thinking, yeah, I want to connect with someone who's from where I'm from, maybe you want to kind of get comfortable re-speaking your language or going to get food or play football or dating or whatnot, Africlick should be what you can think about as a way to connect to your culture.
Very, very cool. Thank you for sharing that. And so, is it for people, let's say like 18 and up?
Yes, officially. I mean, the app does have two modes. One is a dating mode, and one is like a networking sort of friendship mode. So you can sort of, when you sign up, depending on which mode you select, you have a slightly different user experience. Because of course, if somebody signs up for dating, there are certain things we want to know in terms of people's hobbies and the music they like. Whether it's kind of like Afro beats, we might be interested in sort of which jollof rice is your kind of correct affiliation. Things like your religion, and also we have built in this concept of what we call a geolocation, which I think is, it's very specific to Africans and particularly diaspora, where a lot of us are between two cities. So, for example, my profile would say I'm Dayo and I'm in London, but I'm also from Nigeria. And for me, it's important to have both locations and my heritage. That's like an integral part of my profile. Whereas maybe if I was to make a profile on Tinder, all I can say is Dial from London. It's not taking my sort of like ethnicity and my culture into account.
Oh, wow. That's super interesting. And so what led you to like creating Africlick? Like, was it based on like your personal experiences, like maybe dating or trying to network with people from like similar cultures, or were you like maybe using Tinder or Bumble or something and were like, this is just not for me? Like, what kind of led you to like creating this?
Pretty much all of the above that you've summarized really well. So prior to creating Africlick, I was working as an IT management consultant, more on the technology side within financial services. So I spent a few years at Accenture and at Deloitte and Touche. So I was very much in that high performance consulting. They would call it a lifestyle, where there's a lot of travel involved. So the job is maybe about sometimes maybe 40% travel. And you're kind of away Monday, if you're lucky, Monday to Thursday, because then you can work from your home office on Friday. A lot of the times it's Monday to Friday. So I would kind of be living in hotels for maybe 6 months at a time, sometimes a year at a time. And what that meant was that it was very hard to date, because you would meet someone in London and be like, well, you can only see me Fridays and Saturdays and a little bit of Sunday. And it also made it hard to plan things, because maybe if you wanted to do something like the theatre or a concert, a lot of these things happen in the weekday, and I was never in London on the weekday. So I was definitely finding it hard to date. And even the times where maybe I was based in London, as is, I think, fairly typical of a lot of diaspora experiences, on a daily basis and even on a weekly basis. And this was in my case where, for me, I was, consciously even looking for somebody who was Nigerian, like me. Um, I wasn't even meeting new Nigerians because pretty much everyone in my team was white. Pretty much everyone on the floor was white. Maybe the only people of color in the building would be perhaps the security guard, uh, maybe a couple of the executive assistants who are like married and usually female. So I was just beginning to realize that, look, even from a numbers perspective, dating was very difficult, and I was hearing this echoed from both women and men as well. So the only maybe opportunities people were having to meet was church and weddings, but there are not that many weddings. Weddings happen in the summer, and maybe like kind of parties. And a lot of people were saying that, look, once I've exhausted my immediate social circle, my friends, and possibly my friends of friends, there was nothing after that. And so I then, so kind of, yeah, at the time, yes, you always hear about Tinder. So I, downloaded Tinder, started swiping as you do. First of all, you realize, okay, well, that there's no race filter. So I can't even shortcut to what I know I'm looking for, my preference. So I find I was having to swipe through, and actually it's weird, the way the Tinder algorithm seems to work, and all my friends would joke about this. You'll be swiping through like loads of white guys, then suddenly you'll get like 8 black guys in a row, and then it goes white again. And it's like, we all kind of notice this. So then I also noticed that, well, even if I swiped yes to a black guy, I had no guarantee he was on Tinder to even meet black girls. And then when we look at perhaps a lot of people are familiar with, the OkCupid dating website, and they have about 5 million members worldwide. And they did the race and attraction survey, which was done in, I believe, 2015 and repeated in 2018. And that's the survey, in essence, that I think a lot of us would have heard the narrative around sort of like pop culture, where they said that black women are at the bottom of the proverbial dating totem pole, meaning that black women statistically have the least favorable outcomes with online dating when it comes to if anybody responds to their contacts. And I'm sure like a lot of people have heard this around, they maybe just don't necessarily know that it came from a data science study. So in essence, proving that, and there was a whole ranking where I think white men had the best outcomes, followed by white women, and then there was sort of some other races, but I think it was black women and Asian men that were right at the bottom. And I think it's something even Issa Rae has sort of spoken about. So I was also understanding that, well, I was even statistically disadvantaged on the mainstream platforms. And I think the final sort of like, for me, the straw that broke the camel's back from my side, it was a date I went on because I kind of got to the point where I was like, fine, I'm going to broaden my options. Let me not limit myself to just dating from within my race, as it's so difficult to meet people, and not just my race specifically, but even my culture, because I'm aware that for a lot of us, and this is that it's more than race, black or white. Black is not a monolith. We have so many cultures and so many religions. So I was like, look, okay, rather than restrict myself to just Nigerians, let's just open it up. So I matched with a guy on Tinder. Can't remember, so I wouldn't say his name, but in terms of like his ethnicity, his heritage, he was like British, white. I believe maybe his grandparents were Italian, but by all means, he was just sort of a British guy. And so we matched, and we were talking for about 2 weeks, and he was very, very keen to take it offline and meet up, which I always advise. I think is a good thing in online dating, where you want to take it offline as soon as you're comfortable to see what's happening in real world interaction. So just kind of where you stand. So we arranged to meet up after work, I recall, And he had told me he worked in finance, in merger and acquisitions, which is a very it's a very hectic, intense, timely, project-based job. So when I got to the restaurant, he was there before me, and it was a restaurant bar. He was standing outside, and he was on a work call. And so he saw me as I approached. He continued, taking his work call. And I remember he was, how sort of like finance people talk on the phone. And he was like, yes, 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 we're going to make this transaction for X million. And don't worry, everything will be fine. And, it was kind of intense into what he was doing.
Uh-huh.
So he waved at me, and can I say he mouthed? So meaning he made the signs. He moved his lips, but words didn't come out. So I kind of lip read him because he was on the work call, and he gestured and he said, "Just go inside. I'll see you inside when I finish my work call." So that was
Wow.
totally fine with me. I mean, he did.
Oh, you're
For me,
okay with it? Okay.
I was totally okay. I was like, do you know what? First of all, he was there on time. I was 5 minutes late. He was standing outside, and I totally get, like work is work, and especially when you're an employee, a worker bee. So I was like, fine, finish what you need to do. So I went inside the venue, and it was a restaurant stroke bar, which I specifically chose because for dates I like the option where you can start at the bar and then there isn't that pressure to have a dinner, because dinner can be quite a big commitment from a
Mm-hmm.
time perspective if you're not getting along. And also sometimes, depending on whether you go Dutch or the man pays, a lot of men default to paying, and dating gets very expensive because they're always paying for lots of dinners. So I just sat up at the bar with my back was facing the entrance, thinking, okay, we'll start off at the bar and just see where this goes. So I kind of saw him at the corner of my eye. He must have finished his work call, and he walked inside the restaurant. He scanned the room to look for me, and he saw another black girl sitting in the restaurant, and he went to sit opposite her.
No.
Yes, he did.
Oh my
She's,
gosh.
now, this girl had a different build to me. She had a different complexion to me. Her hair was different. It wasn't even as if like we had no similarities. He sat there for a few seconds, I suppose, until he read the expression on her face. And he scanned the room again and he saw me. And so he kind of rushed over and he sat with me.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
How did you feel?
God, it was so good. I was indignant, frustrated, and I was embarrassed for him. And I think I was disappointed as well, because it so naturally uncovered a lot of the things that, are perhaps unsaid, in terms of it. It really showed to me that he didn't see me as an individual. He saw my race first. He saw my ethnicity first. And it also showed me he was, and there are some people like that, he was that person that clearly has difficulty distinguishing between people of another race, which to me is
Wow.
like it's super unattractive. Um, yeah. So, and I'm sure we've all had those maybe office situations, right, where sometimes we'll keep on getting called the name of a colleague that we share the ethnicity with, even though we don't sort of look like each other, or it used to happen maybe in education. But yeah, I wasn't expecting it on a date, and I was like, he just saw me outside. He just saw me. So
Seriously.
yes. So for me, that was the final straw. I deleted Tinder, I got off Tinder, and I was like, there has to be a better experience for Black people, and particularly from a cultural perspective, for people who are connected to their heritage, whether it's African or Caribbean or Afro Latina, Afro Brazilian. I'm like, it has to be better. And that was the moment where I knew I had to create something.
Wow. I mean, sorry about that
Yeah.
experience. And I'm sure lots of Black women or just women of color have experienced things similar to that. So I can't imagine.
Yes, microaggressions. And I wasn't familiar with the word microaggression at the time. So maybe that was even harder because you kind of don't have a name for it. But at least now I know it was a microaggression.
Oh my gosh. And so that's why Africlick exists and
Yeah.
needs to exist. Yeah, to at least lower some of those issues that you'd run into trying to maybe date people that are outside of your culture.
Yes. Because, I believe on Africa as well, we don't stop anyone joining. So everyone is welcome officially, regardless of their ethnicity. But what we ask is that you appreciate and respect the culture rather than fetishizing and perhaps just seeing, blackness and, stereotyping certain traits.
Wow. Okay. I mean, that's good to know. I think that was going to be one of my questions. Like, how do you, like, bar non, non-black people, or how do you like kind of verify people's like actual ethnicity or background?
Yes, so it is totally open to all because then of course there are also white Africans as you know as well, but it's open to everyone, and yeah, and it's really about so as long as they appreciate the culture and what we've seen, like because currently now Africlick is in a beta phase at the moment, so we're in beta on the Android store and then through iOS on test flight, and what we're seeing is even when, because I remember one of our, we had I think I was doing a talk at Google for Startups in London, and it was a Turkish guy, and he was really interested, and he was signing up for the app, and he was testing it, and then at several stages in the sign up process, he came to me with questions. So we, at one point during the sign up, we asked the user for their sickle cell genotype. Now, of course, a lot of us are familiar. Sickle cell is if you're African, I believe it's a 28% chance that you may be a healthy carrier of the sickle cell trait,
Oh,
which
wow.
would then be, yes, which of course, in sickle cell is for those who may not know, it's a hereditary blood disorder for which there isn't a cure. So for anyone who is born and maybe has full sickle cell, it's a very difficult, very sort of painful life that they would have. So it's something that we have to be conscious of, at least when we're choosing a partner, if we have the intention to start a family. So during the sign up process, and what we do with Africlick as well is we don't publish the sickle cell genotype because we think it's sensitive information, but the algorithm in the back end can take it into account, just so we can kind of like begin to have that conversation. So going back to this lovely Turkish guy, when we were at Google for Startups in London, he was testing the app, and he came to me with the screen, and he was like, "Oh, what do I do with this? I don't know what this is." And there's an option when you sign up to say, "I don't know," but it was perhaps a signal or a hurdle for maybe somebody who wasn't within the culture. And then also, we have a section when you build your profile where you can select your hobbies and interests. Now, what I love about the section is I found when I was signing up for maybe other dating apps, I wasn't really fully able to express the cultural aspects of my interests through those apps. So, like for Africlick, for example, when you choose the music you like, we have options for things like, I think, Afrobeat and soca. When you choose what type of traveler you are, you can say things like, well, I'm a backpacker, or I'm a city traveler, or I'm a luxury traveler. We have things like jollof rice, the type of drinks that we like to drink. And, and he was puzzled about all of these things. He didn't really know and I'm on sign up. And I'm like, so they're also subtle signals, meaning, like for example, if and sometimes those things, it can be to do with your ethnicity or your skin color, but sometimes it's also the culture. It's perfectly feasible that you could be a non-black person, but if you're very kind of attached to maybe your particular area of Africa that you like, you will know a lot of these things. You can, if you see Nollywood as an option, you're going to be like, yeah, I'm into Nollywood movies or Gollywood or whatever your thing might be.
That's so cool. Wow. And so before I ask a few more questions about Africlick, I would like to maybe get to know more about your story. So you said you're Nigerian. So were you born in Nigeria or were you born in London? And what was your experience just growing up?
So I was born in London and grew up for first part of my life in London, then moved to Nigeria for a few years, and then moved back to London. So I actually consider I was very lucky in that aspect, particularly, and I think I even mean, well, lucky, I think, to experience dual cultures firsthand. And particularly, I think when growing up I think particularly when I moved to Nigeria, it was definitely an awakening of self. And it was the first time, growing up in London, I also grew up in a very white area. So, for example, in the both my nursery school and my primary school, there was only one other black family, like in both experiences. So, that means growing up, it wasn't I wouldn't say it was not racism. And of course, then you're very young, right? When you're 4, 5, 6 years old, uh, if a kid, I would be asked questions like, oh, why is your hair like that? Why is your skin like that? And it was by no means hostile. They were just genuine questions, because for the majority of my friends at school that I grew up with, I was the first black person they had like come into contact with. So, so you're feeling a little bit like I don't know, like on display or like an exhibit. And I definitely recall living in Nigeria, sort of, it was an amazing experience. I would say that. Granted, initially when I moved there, I didn't quite fit in because I was too British. And I remember I started at primary school, and the school decided that because I was coming from the UK, they said they should put me in 1 year ahead.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and then I don't know how much if you schooled much, like at least in Nigeria, there's something called double promotion, and they're very casual. So what it means is if you're in primary school and if you're smart, they'll let you skip a year and go ahead. And they call it, oh, so you had a double promotion. Whereas I know in like the UK schooling system, like it's not like that. However smart you are, you do every year. Which I think there is benefit in that, right? Because it's not just about the academic that you're learning, you're kind of growing as a person. So they decided, oh yeah, she's coming from the UK, we're going to put her in a year ahead because of course the UK is so much more behind. So what I found when I got into the new class was I was good on every subject, but my maths and it wasn't behind, right? Because they had put me a year ahead, but I couldn't keep up with the maths. And I guess with maths being such a cornerstone, they then decided to move me back into the year I would be in for my age. So first of all, that was kind of humiliating, and everyone was laughing, like, "Oh, she thinks she's so clever. She's come from the UK. Ha 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 ha." She's already demoted, even though I was demoted to the year I should have been in relative to my age. But it also showed, even in terms of the standards of education, at least in Nigeria at the time, it meant that, well, for Nigeria, we were ahead in maths. Granted, English and other subjects, maybe like on par, but maths was definitely ahead, and even definitely on reflection, I know that's why my maths is good today. I know that was partially why I chose to do a computer science degree. It was because the way maths was for me, taught in Nigeria was, I don't know, it was just kind of like I understood the fundamentals more. And there wasn't this notion of, oh, maths is difficult. There wasn't this notion of maths and sciences for boys. Like, everyone sort of across the genders kind of got in there. But I mean, I would also say the experience of living in Nigeria, where I was part of the majority ethnically and not the minority, was definitely transformational and life changing. So seeing policemen, politicians, teachers, everyone, where everyone looks like you. So there isn't a notion of there wasn't a notion of me being black. It was more about culture. So it would be me saying, well, Dayo is Yoruba, or maybe my mum who happens to be Edo. People identified based on their tribe, as opposed to black. And I feel very fortunate to have had that experience, in a way, perhaps a bit of a decolonization.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would also say, even from a child's perspective, growing up in London was great culturally, because every weekend there we would go to museums, we would go to children's theatre, and like act and learn a play. I would go and do art stuff. Growing up in London, definitely from a cultural exposure perspective, it was great. But Nigeria was just, there wasn't that kind of culture, but it was just so much more fun because the weather was hot every day. We had a pool, and unlike in London, where maybe if you had like a play date, the parents would call each other and arrange and text, and there'd be all this. It was such a drama to share, where and then the parents would ask, oh, what does she like to eat, and then we would make sure we had like the food for them and stuff. And in Nigeria, we would just drop in on people. Like, it wasn't like set something up. We would just be in the car, like, okay, let's go and see this person. And you would just turn up, have fun, play. Do you know what I mean? Like, run around outside. And yeah, it was amazing. I would say that.
Wow. And so when did you go back to London? Was it for college?
So college, just to check if I'm using the right terminology, I think so. That's what we call secondary school. So I was about 11, 12 when I came back to London.
Ah, okay. So I think, yeah, by college I meant like university, like after grade
Okay.
12. Uh-huh.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, no, I came back earlier than
Okay.
that. Yeah, so about age 11, and then I would still visit like a few times a year.
And that wraps it up. Thank you so much for listening in today, and thank you, Undu, for an amazing interview. We look forward to the next episode. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover next, please leave that in the comment section below and let us know. Don't forget to follow Boa54 on Facebook and Instagram, and share this video and channel with your family and friends. Also, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and the notification bell next to it so you can keep learning about Africa and you don't miss anything. And if you just subscribed, welcome to the family, and see you guys in the next video.